watching Property TV.
Hello and welcome to Property Question Time. I'm Stephen Galpin and this is a show where you can have your property related questions answered by our team of property experts. And joining me today, Sally Wang, welcome back to you, international property expert and author, I note. So again, welcome. And a newcomer to Property Question Time, Ryan Hughes, property investor and buy-to-let specialist. Welcome, Ryan.
Thank you.
Good trip down from Manchester?
Very good, thank you.
Good. Well, that's great. I expect you're really looking forward to HS2 and paying the exorbitant price for no doubt the tickets will be, but but you'll be here half an hour quicker anyway. That's the main thing. Okay, well, we'll get straight on with the show, and Sally, you're going first. With rental levels rising across the UK, do the panel think that this will regenerate investment from overseas purchasers, particularly from the Asia Pacific areas?
A short answer is yes, definitely. Because during the COVID period, for the overseas investors to buy investment properties in the UK, they're mainly looking at two aspects. One is the rental return, the other one is the capital gain. So during the COVID period, we all know that the rental has dropped dramatically. I'm not sure about in north of the England, but in London, central London, some of their areas were looking at 15% to 25% of the rental drop during the worst time. So if we divided the overseas investors into two different groups, one of the group is that they are familiar with the UK property market. They have the confidence here, and then they believe the market is going to bounce back. Those are the people, they were thinking, okay, even when I lose the rent for this year or next year, I believe the rent will bounce back. So they will take the time as opportunity. They still keep buying because they believe they can buy some bargains. So these people still stay. But the other group of overseas investors, they'll be like, first time enter the market. They will become very worried because they'll be like, okay, I invested so much money on this property overseas, and the rental that I get is really low. And I don't know when this pandemic is gonna end. Then there's other factors of uncertainty. So where this is going to lead to, then they become worried, then they confused, and then they just feel like, okay, let's wait and see what we're going to do next when the situation clear. So this group of people, we lost them from the market. Now it's really nice when the rental kind of bounce back because from this they say confidence. The confidence is, okay, UK market, the property market bounce back really, really quickly. And we know last September and October, we actually achieve a higher rent compared to the pre-COVID level. So this gives them a huge boost. They'd be like, okay, this is a safe market for me to invest in, and I'm going to enter this time. So a short answer is a yes, definitely. But obviously, for overseas investors, they're looking at other factors as well. And this is only one factor. But then to answer this directly question, short answer is yes.
Tell me, Sally, with the areas that you're familiar with, the Asia Pacific areas, do people invest in the hope of capital gain rather than income? And do they look at the rental income as simply a way of paying for the holding costs of that property while they wait for a capital gain, or is income the main driver?
Okay, so we're looking for the Chinese, because I'm mainly dealing with the Chinese all over the world who buy in the UK. So they always have a must kind of reason to invest in the UK. One of them is either their children are studying here. The other thing is they must diverse the risk of their asset. So those are the two must reasons. For the return, to be honest, the capital gain in the UK is not that high. If you buy right in China or buy in Hong Kong, if you buy it right, you can double your capital growth in probably a couple of years. So here, they can never.
I think we better all move, haven't we, Ryan? I think.
Yeah. I'll take the good one.
We're off.
Yeah, but then, so they're looking at the reasons, the education, the kids is going to use this. So for them, it's a long-term family plan. So obviously, they don't want to throw the money away. they will for sure look into the rental return. So when we educate them about rental return, we always tell them, okay, you use finance, and it's a different return. You don't use finance, it's cash. Most of our buyers are cash buyers. They don't want to use a mortgage. Then, here's your rental return. You have a gross rental return, which is your yearly rental income. Then you divide the against your whole buying cost. And then the net is we have to deduct the holding cost, like service charge, ground rent, and income tax and everything. So basically, net return, most of the properties in London, we're looking at maybe 2%, 2 to 3% the net, which is not very high. But for them, because they have this long-term family demand, the kids might use in the future. There's a long lease, 199 years. Most of the properties they can keep in the family. And the kids can use it when they go to school or when they have a job. They have a place in London. So all these factors, they add up. And capital growth, of course, that's a factor they look at as well, because if you buy 2 properties, obviously you want to 10 years later, you make some gain. So that's the analysis we will help them to do as well. We will show them, okay, here's infrastructure, HS2, right? Hopefully it opens in 2029 or 2033, I don't know. But when the Elizabeth line happened on that day, our investor, they're super happy. Because if we buy along the line 3-4 years ago, they know they're not going to double their value in 2-3 years, but they have a higher chance to get some sort of a capital growth. Yeah. So, yeah.
Okay. All right, Sally, thank you very much for that comprehensive answer. Ryan, your first question. And this is quite a difficult one, and I'll explain to the viewers why in a moment. But do the panel think that the new regulations re no-fault evictions will have detrimental effect on investment in the buy-to-let market? And I think for those that don't know, we have to go back to the late 80s when assured short-hold tenancies were brought in, and they were brought in to give landlords the opportunity to actually take back properties once they'd let them out after a set period of time. And that was in an attempt to solve the housing crisis, I suppose, that was there at the time, and one that we've still got today. So it does seem to me to be a rather retrograde step to be talking about this, because again, you're going to put landlords off, I would have thought, if they're not going to be able to have their properties back at reasonable times. So what do you think?
Yeah, it's a very tricky one for everyone, really. But I think the key is a strong relationship, whether that be via the letting agent and the tenant or the owner and the tenant. I believe there should always be some form of relationship with the landlord and the tenant. COVID was a perfect example of that. It's very much give and take, because you have a landlord that not everyone's a cash buyer that has their own mortgage to pay on the property, and if the tenant doesn't pay, then it's really stuck, because there may be no property at all. So I think flexibility is key, and keeping in close contact with them. I think it's always good to know what that person does as a job, how they may be affected, touching base with them, even if it's not necessarily the rent's been missed, but just seeing how they're doing, what they're up to in their current life, and family position, really. People that are having children, changing jobs, you have to know your property is key to that. That is their base. So for investors, I think the flexibility is, as you just mentioned there with the assured, we're seeing a lot of people offer different variations now anyway, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. And I think as long as the landlord puts something in place and starts them slow and steady, make sure that they're regularly paying, making sure there's no huge changes to their personal circumstances. The key is the relationship.
I agree with you. We've had commercial agents on in particular that have come on and said, well, COVID's been marvellous for relationships, because we had in this country for a long time this business of, institutional landlords, the big ones that owned most of the high streets and most of the shopping areas or business parks and that sort of thing, and all they wanted was blue chip tenants at the highest rent for the longest period of time. And that relationship's changed now. They've had to talk to their tenants, they've had to encourage their tenants. And I think, again, I think when the government start to meddle in the property market, they forget that, in essence, a good landlord will get good tenants.
Exactly. I believe in that.
That's
Chinese
the
say it's
issue,
good
isn't it?
karma.
Yeah.
It's a good karma, and a lot of our very good landlords, they're so nice to us. They are very friendly, very pleasant. They treat us really well. And guess what? They attract really good tenants as well. It's kind of like a karma thing. Yeah.
I think, again, just to finish that subject up, I wouldn't object if there was some kind of competence test, if you like, for smaller landlords. I think it would be quite beneficial if they perhaps had to attend even a day's course on something on their responsibilities. We live in a very litigious age, don't we? So for them to understand their responsibilities could be very helpful. And I think the government would be better off focusing on that kind of education and that kind of interference rather than practical commercial matters.
Yeah, kind of like penalise the landlords.
Okay, well, that's all we've got time for in this half of the show, so join me again after break when we'll be asking Ryan and Saleh some more of your questions.
You are watching Property TV. You are watching Property TV.
Hello and welcome back to part 2 of Property Question Time. I'm Stephen Galpin and I'm joined by Saleh Wang and Ryan Hughes. Welcome back, guys. And Saleh, your second question.
Yeah.
I am a new buy-to-let landlord. I'm being advised by a number of agents that the area I am in with my investment will attract more overseas tenants as opposed to UK-based applicants. Can the panel advise me on any ideas to maximise the opportunity and make my property more attractive to someone from overseas? Well, I don't think there's anybody better to answer that question than yourself. So.
Yes, I know, right? And so basically, when we're looking at overseas tenants, we're mainly looking at 2 different groups of people. One of them is professionals, which was relocated to this country. The other group of people we're looking at are students. They come here to study. So maybe the kids come here, maybe the parents join them occasionally as well. So when we have the target tenants, target audience, your customer in mind, then you know how to attract them. So to make it more attractive to the professionals, I would advise that you furnish your property with good quality, solid furnitures. For example, very hard mattress for the bed, very simple sofa, dining table, the things for them to just move in quickly. Nice and clean, have security, make it feel like home and convenient. That should be enough. And then the second group, the students, I would advise that maybe when they rent your property, you can change, if you want to attract this kind of people. For example, your property is near LSE, UCL, the universities. So maybe you want to pay attention to your tenancy agreement term. You want to bring the renewal cycle into the summer busy season. So for example, your property completed in December, maybe don't sign a 1-year contract, 12 months AST. Maybe sign 18 months, maybe sign 6 months. So you bring it to the summer cycle, or maybe 8 months, to September, because that is the time that you can rent out your property with higher rent, and you will have a higher demand for students. So this will be the most valuable advice I would give. And also on top of that, because of students, they probably don't, clean the property themselves that well. Maybe if you have a very good cleaner in mind, this is what we do for our properties like this. We will have a couple of very good cleaners with very competitive rates. When the tenant sign the contract, we would advise them to take on this cleaner, do it maybe monthly or at least quarterly. Clean your place, look after the property. It's good for you, good for the property, good for the tenant. Everybody's happy. So that would be my advice. Yeah.
So let me ask you, a lot of the residential buildings here in London, particularly the skyscrapers, they have in the headlease, they'll have conditions like for the purpose of accommodating one single family.
Yes.
I'm sure you've come across that lease term many times. Do you find that freeholders enforce that? I'm thinking in particular, you're talking about students, and it would be a classic where 3 or 4 students from different families would occupy one apartment, for instance. Yeah. How do you cope with that?
Okay, so we rarely have that we rarely have that because with the Asian investors, most likely in London, they buy apartments. So we most likely sell them a 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, and 3-bedroom. For a 4-bedroom apartment, you know the London market, most of the developers, they don't have that many stocks for 4-bedroom. 5-bedroom, I rarely see a 5-bedroom. When it comes to 4 or 5 bedrooms, usually it's owner-occupied. So for the letting stocks, we're mainly looking at 1-bed, 2-bed, 3-bed. There's no way we're going to put 4 students in 1 3-bedroom apartment. Because so every time when we have a tenant put in an offer, we will give the description to the landlord. We pre-screen the tenants. 3-bedroom, there's no way we're going to put 4 students there. So that is not an issue. I would say 99% of the chance we will encounter. To be honest, no, we have never have 4 students want to rent a property.
And on the percentages of bringing business from Asia Pacific areas, what's the percentage split between the student market and the professional market that you talked about?
You mean the tenant side or the owner side?
On the tenant side, is it 50-50?
For our company, 99% of our landlords are Chinese, like from China, Chinese in China, Hong Kong, Singapore, Australia, Canada, everywhere. Our tenants, 90% of them are non-Chinese because our letting and management team, they are like local team, like John, they're all English. We have Italian, French as well. So we don't, when we're looking for tenants, we go with the local market rate. Okay. We don't specifically just looking for Chinese.
Okay, cool, thank you. Okay, Ryan, your second question. Apart from the obvious difference in purchase price and the factual difference in rental levels that's associated with the purchase price, obviously, do the panel have any thoughts on the main differences in the buy-to-let market between the north and south of the UK? I'm looking for advice on where to invest as a newcomer and want to maximise my chances of business success. I mean, I know from people in London, they'll look at some of the areas in the north of England and think, crikey, this is cheap. But there ain't no such thing as a free lunch, is there? You know, there's a reason.
That's the big differentiator for myself. I always advise job creation being the key, where the new companies are, where the commercial properties, not only the residential developments, where these big companies can come and move in, especially up north. We've seen Media City, ITV, BBC, some of the companies moving away from London, looking for cheaper commercial space.
And indeed the government.
And indeed the government, Amazon, Google, there's a lot of them, the banks, there's a lot of clear signs of where people want more value. And that, to me, reflects on rental and again job creation.
Okay, I know in your business you have a nationwide spread of your investments and management expertise. Do you find it easier to control and to manipulate rental properties in London as opposed to, say, Manchester or some of the northern cities?
I think the northern cities, going back to the job creation, it's listed one day, it's gone the same day. There's such huge demand in the north right now, and with the cost of living rising, it's a good move for people, especially if wages aren't increasing for the rental and cost of living's going up. You have to look at how much rent you're paying, where you are, especially from a lot of people work from home. You know, they don't always need to be positioned now. There's a lot of remote working, which then leads for people using cheaper accommodation, which means you can move away from the actual city where your job has been based, which we've seen a huge rise in tenants moving.
I think one of the factors, and in fact we were talking about it before the show, is service charge. Where you have properties in the north and the south, okay, in the north wages are slightly lower than in London. London, the wages are up, so therefore the prices are going to be different. It's just a matter of balance, isn't it? It doesn't really matter. If you're earning more, you can pay more, and if you're earning less, you pay less. But I think the London market has become so fickle with the provision of facilities, swimming pools, saunas, all the rest of it, which whack up the service charge, which then depletes the rental income, doesn't it, or the return, Whereas in the north, I look at various properties that I see being marketed, and they're a lot more, dare I say it, straightforward. You know, it's a block of flats. It's a block of flats. It's not a leisure centre too. So that must have an effect on service charge, bringing it down, and therefore inherently increase the rate of return, I guess. Is that something you find? Or?
Yeah, a lot of the investors, one of the first questions will be, what's the service charge? And sometimes it's a case of, the pictures look great, the price looks great, what's the service charge? And a big key for people investing up north has been the service charge. I think there's a fine balance of the investor or the landlord being comfortable with the property that they're purchasing, because then in a couple of years' time they go, I wish I'd have got the one with the swimming pool. And it really is swings and roundabouts. It's on the individual of what they want to offer the landlord.
Do you know what? I live in a block with a horrendous service charge, and I look at the swimming pool and I very rarely see anybody in it, you know, and yet we're all paying a fortune for it. But look, there we are. I'm going to thank you both very much for coming in today. That's the end of the show. So Sally, Wang, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Steve.
Ryan Hughes, thank you very much for joining us too. Great answers to your questions, so well done.
Thank you.
And I'm Stephen Galpin. Join me again next time on Property Question Time. But before I go, don't forget, if you have any questions for our panels on Property Question Time, get in touch with us, propertytv.uk, and we'll do our best to include your questions. Thanks for watching.